We've had Clover, we've had Becky, and we've had Alan, three very, very different speakers. But I can see that there's been lots of questions coming in, lots of comments. So we're going to go to our first Q&A. So Clover and Alan and Becky, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
You're here. Fantastic. We've had some absolutely fantastic questions coming in via the Slido app. So the first question is from Matilda, age 11. Now Matilda asks, how can we push for our education to include lessons about the climate crisis? So if any of you would like to come in on that question, how can we push for our education to include lessons about the climate crisis?
I can start by saying that I'm afraid, as a teacher, I know we are controlled by certain restraints of which you, Graham, will be fully aware, and you probably answer the question better than I can. But that doing things with scouts and cubs and things like that, I know that the scout movement is focusing on homelessness and climate change. They're the two big push for their year. So that's great. And by asking your cub leader or people, whoever you're involved in, to do stuff about climate change, that would be the good way to start.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
I would add to that and say that often it can feel really alienating if you're just one voice, especially if you're a young person. But if you can find friends, if you can find people who are on board with you, mentors, other teachers who agree with you, and I can guarantee many, many do, all of them on this call for one, then you can create quite the groundswell movement to push for the incorporation of that kind of curriculum into what you're learning at school. Global Action Plan is working on a really exciting initiative to do exactly this. And one of the most cool things about it is that it's not just climate change as an isolated subject. You know, we talked about earlier how climate change is about everything from geography through to our clothes, through to what, for lunch in the cafeteria. So, we're looking at a whole kind of transformation of every part of how we teach young people. And you can be a real driver of that change, Tilly, by asking your teachers and asking the people within your school network what it is that they're able to do, and you can work with them to create that change.
Thanks, Clover. If I can come back to Matilda's question in just a moment and just ask you, Clover, we've got a question from Ted who asks, what can we do to make ourselves less worried about the climate?
Yeah, excellent question. It's really hard not to be worried, right? It only takes 5 minutes of reading the science, direct from the source, looking at the statistics to see that we're in a pretty dire situation. But if we look at climate anxiety, I would start off by saying it's a perfectly normal response. We've gotten very good at kind of sweeping our feelings under the rug, but this surge in mental health difficulties that we're seeing in young people is very symptomatic of the state in which we find ourselves. And so don't try to push those feelings away, really look in the face of them. And what I would say is that you can expand your sort of container for those feelings through agency. So when you identify that sweet spot where you can make the biggest difference and you start taking action, that is one of the single best remedies to dealing with some of that anxiety and stress and fear that is really natural to kind of bubble up.
Thank you, Clover. That's so encouraging and so helpful. I can see from the comments from the delegates signed into Zoom that the first question is getting a lot of conversation, with some great suggestions being made by delegates on how we can help the environment to be a major feature of our curriculum in schools. I will say that from a Robert Ferguson primary school perspective, we have spent quite a lot of time making sure that we use opportunities right across the curriculum to teach it. And I know that is what's going on in a lot of schools. We have a question as well from Charlotte, age 10. Charlotte asks, what can we do to help the environment from our homes during COVID-19? So what can we do to help the environment from our homes during COVID-19? I wonder if I come to Rebecca, what have you been doing in your home during the lockdown?
Well, I mean, obviously, the first thing I would say is that just being at home doesn't mean that you can't get in touch with your MP or local councillor. And in fact, it's a good time to do that, because politicians are genuinely thinking very hard about what happens next after the sort of emergency phase of COVID. And they're thinking particularly about how they restart the economy. Now, there's all kinds of climate questions that come up when you talk about how to restart the economy. And we want to make sure basically that we build back better. That's the phrase, that we come out of this with a more resilient and greener economy. So I'd say now's the perfect time to be involved in that discussion. I also think that you know, for a lot of children, it is a time, it's really difficult not to be at school, but at the same time you do have that time to be following your own interests a bit more, and there's some amazing resources online. So particularly for older children, universities are putting on online courses. So my son, who's now not doing his GCSEs this summer, is actually doing an online course about game theory. But there's some really brilliant online courses about climate science, and I'd be happy to share some links with those. So it's a time to really follow your interests and passions. And the other thing that you can do is and convince everyone else in your household, because you have a captive audience and plenty of time to cook. So if you're talking about changes to lives in terms of you know, having a climate friendly diet and walking and cycling more, I think now's a really good time to start experimenting.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Now, Samuel, Alex and Amelia at Stowe Primary School have asked, please can you tell us the 3 best things we can do to make a difference? So I think since we've got 3 of you, and since we're just about to come to our first breakout session, maybe if I could ask each of you to say your top thing for making a difference, or if you want, go for the full 3, if they're just going to trip off your tongue. So if I can ask the 3 of you, the question from Stowe Primary School, what are the 3 best things we can do to make a difference?
Shall I start?
Yes.
Mine's, I'm going to say one thing, and it is talk about climate change. Really simple, but really effective. Whenever you think about it, whenever it sort of pops into your head during a conversation with friends, with teachers, with family, voice that. If it's, you know, if it's a concern, or if it's something that you'd like to do, something more you know, something positive that you'd like to do, make sure that you talk about it. And people don't talk about climate change enough because they're worried about, you know, they're worried about being awkward or being difficult about it. But if we all talked about climate as much as we thought about it, that would be a huge breakthrough in overcoming this sort of denial that we're currently facing as a society.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca. Alan, can we come to you next? Alan.
Yes, I'm going to give a question rather than an answer. Can you read that the right way around? This is the kind of activity I do with young people, trying to decide what is the most important thing. They can fill in their own ones and then rank it in a group and try to work out what you think is the most pressing thing that needs to be done. It gets lots of discussion, and it's purely discussions, no right answers for that. But I particularly like what the first speaker said, who I've forgotten her name, I didn't write it down.
Clover.
Clover, that's one. She said about follow your passion. If you're passionate about fashion, then that's what you do. So I think that's a brilliant idea. You need to follow what really makes you work, what makes you tick, and make that into your goal.
Okay, thank you so much, Alan. And Clover.
Amazing answers. I'm going to be super ambitious and try and squeeze in 3. So yeah, first off, identify your problem. Get a lot of focus on what you want to change, because it can be super overwhelming otherwise. So think about whether it is food or fashion or transport, and get a lot of focus. And then really embrace your lack of knowledge. So ask tons of questions, because there's going to be so much that you learn over the process of discovering solutions and really coming to understand the problem. So be okay with not knowing and ask for help. And then finally, recruit your friends. You know, you need to build your tribe. You need to find supporters, mentors, people who are going to enable you to achieve even the wildest kind of ambitions. So those three: find what makes you tick, embrace your lack of knowledge, and then recruit your tribe.
Fantastic.